It showed itself in the smallest, most unexpected ways. In an empty chair at a school assembly, in a playground that grew too quiet at dusk, in the careful way her name was still spoken, as if saying it too loudly might disturb something fragile. People learned to carry the sorrow alongside their daily routines, folding it into conversations and memories, never quite setting it down. Some tried to find meaning in kindness, in protecting other children, in telling Rowan's story so she would not fade into silence. Yet even as years softened the sharpest edges of pain, the absence remained, steady, undeniable, and woven forever into the fabric of the lives she had touched. Community meetings grew more frequent, not out of panic, but out of a quiet determination to ensure that such a loss would never be repeated. Doors that had once stayed politely closed were opened to difficult conversations about trust, vigilance, and responsibility. People checked in on one another more often, small gestures carrying a deeper weight than before. Still, beneath these changes lingered a question with no simple answer: how to move forward without leaving Rowan behind. For many, remembrance became its own form of protection. Her name was spoken in classrooms, written into local projects, and carried in the hearts of those who refused to let her story fade into the background of passing years. In this way, even in absence, Rowan continued to shape Stella, reminding the town of both its fragility and its enduring capacity for care. Some investigators admitted that certain details never truly left them: the sound of a quiet room during interviews, the weight of evidence laid carefully across a table, the moment when hope narrowed into certainty. Even years later, Rowan's name could surface in memory without warning, carried by a familiar street, a similar case, or the simple sight of a child laughing in safety. These reminders were not only painful, they were also a quiet promise to remain vigilant. In the years that followed, the lessons of the case shaped procedures, sharpened instincts, and deepened compassion. Officers spoke more gently to families, listened more closely to what was left unsaid, and approached each investigation with an awareness that behind every report was a life capable of being forever altered. Though the work demanded distance, Rowan's story ensured that some measure of humanity was always kept near, guiding their duty long after the headlines had faded. For some, those memories surfaced at unexpected milestones: graduations, first jobs, weddings, moments when the passage of time felt especially visible. They would pause to imagine who Rowan might have become, what dreams she would have followed, and how her presence might have changed the paths of those around her. In this quiet wondering, grief intertwined with tenderness, allowing remembrance to feel less like pain and more like an act of care. Though childhood eventually gave way to adulthood, the bond they shared in those early years remained unbroken. Rowan's story became a gentle thread running through their lives, reminding them of the fragility of innocence and the importance of kindness in ordinary days. And in choosing to remember her not only for how she was lost, but for how she lived, they ensured that a part of her light continued forward with them into the years she never had the chance to see. Some days, moving forward felt almost impossible, as if time itself had fractured into a before and an after that could never be reconciled. Yet in quiet, determined ways, they kept choosing to live. They spoke Rowan's name in stories filled with warmth rather than only sorrow, held on to traditions that connected past to present, and found strength in one another when words failed. Healing did not arrive as a single moment of peace, but as a gradual softening, a willingness to carry love alongside grief instead of beneath it. In honoring Rowan, they also discovered a deeper compassion for others who carried invisible wounds. What began as private mourning slowly became a source of empathy, shaping how they met the world and the people within it. And though the absence never disappeared, it transformed into something gentler over time, a quiet presence of memory, love, and endurance that remained woven into every step of the life they continued to build. For those who had waded through trials, appeals, and years of uncertainty, the final ruling brought a kind of stillness, but not the relief many had imagined. Silence replaced anticipation, and in that silence lingered the realization that no verdict could return laughter to an empty room or rewrite the moment everything changed. The law had spoken, yet grief remained, unchanged by procedure or time. Over the years, people came to understand justice less as an ending and more as a boundary, a point where the courts could go no further, leaving healing to unfold in its own uncertain way. Peace, when it appeared at all, arrived quietly through memory, connection, and the slow rebuilding of meaning after loss. And in that fragile space between what was decided and what was still felt, Rowan's story continued to ask difficult questions about accountability, compassion, and how a community learns to live with what cannot be undone. These reflections were not driven by blame alone, but by a deep, shared longing to understand how something so devastating could unfold unnoticed. People revisited memories, conversations, and small details that once seemed ordinary, wondering whether different choices or earlier attention might have altered the path of events. In that searching, sorrow blended with responsibility, shaping a quiet resolve to listen more closely and act more quickly when concern first appears. Over time, this awareness became part of the community's collective conscience. Safeguards were strengthened, voices were encouraged to speak without hesitation, and the well-being of children was placed at the center of everyday vigilance. Though such efforts could not change the past, they carried forward a fragile hope that learning from loss might spare another family the same enduring grief, and that Rowan's story, in its deepest pain, might still guide others toward protection and care. Sometimes imperfectly, sometimes too slowly, but with a growing awareness of what is at stake. Policies were reviewed, training was expanded, and conversations that once felt uncomfortable became necessary parts of prevention. Change did not erase what had happened, yet it signaled a collective refusal to let the lesson fade into routine. In this way, Rowan's story carried forward a quiet purpose. It lived not only in memory, but in the careful attention of adults, the questions asked sooner rather than later, and the willingness to protect even when certainty was unclear. Though born from tragedy, that vigilance became a form of remembrance, an enduring promise that her life, however brief, would continue shaping a safer future for children yet to come. In the quiet spaces where memory lives, it is these simple, tender images that remain the clearest. The sound of her laughter carried on an ordinary afternoon, the careful way she held a crayon, the warmth she brought into rooms without trying. Such moments resist the weight of tragedy, insisting that her life be measured not by how it ended, but by how brightly it was lived while it was here. For those who continue to speak her name, remembrance becomes an act of protection against forgetting. It allows love to stand where loss once felt overwhelming, and it keeps Rowan present in ways no passage of time can erase. And so her story endures not only as a warning or a sorrow, but as a quiet testament to innocence, connection, and the enduring power of being deeply, unmistakably human. In this way, memory became woven into the town's identity, shaping how people understood both their past and their responsibility to the future. Annual gatherings, quiet moments of reflection, and stories shared across generations ensured that Rowan was never reduced to a distant chapter. Instead, she remained a presence, gentle, solemn, and deeply human, carried forward by those who believed remembrance itself could be an act of care. And as years stretched into decades, the sharpness of grief slowly softened into something steadier. What endured was not only sorrow, but a collective promise to watch more closely, to listen more carefully, and to hold compassion at the center of ordinary life. Through that promise, Rowan's story continued to live, not bound only to tragedy, but to the enduring hope that even the most painful loss can shape a community toward greater kindness. It is in these gentle rituals that grief finds a place to rest without disappearing. Each small act of remembrance says that a life mattered, that love persists beyond absence, and that silence will not be allowed to close over what was lost. Though such gestures cannot change the past, they shape the meaning carried forward, turning sorrow into something that can still nurture compassion and care. Over time, remembrance becomes less about holding on to pain and more about honoring connection. The story is told not only with tears, but with tenderness, with the quiet understanding that to remember is also to protect, to keep watch, and to affirm the value of every fragile, irreplaceable life. In this way, Rowan's memory continues to move gently through the world, not as a shadow alone, but as a soft and enduring light guiding others toward empathy, vigilance, and hope. What endures, then, is not the mystery or the spectacle, but the quiet human weight carried long after public attention fades. The headlines disappear, the courtrooms empty, and the world continues forward. Yet for those most closely touched, time moves differently, measured in memories, in anniversaries, in the steady work of learning how to live alongside absence. Remembering this truth asks something gentle but important of all who listen to such stories, to look past curiosity and toward compassion, to see not only what happened but who is loved, who is lost, and who continues to endure. In holding that awareness, even from a distance, we honor Rowan in the simplest and most meaningful way, by refusing to let her life be reduced to a case, and instead allowing it to remain what it always was, a story of a child deeply loved, and a reminder of the fragile humanity that connects us all. Her influence is felt not in grand monuments, but in the quiet choices people make each day, to listen more closely, to act more quickly, to care more deeply than convenience might require. In classrooms, homes, and shared public spaces, an unseen thread of awareness now runs beneath ordinary life, reminding others that protection begins with attention and empathy. Through these small, steady acts, Rowan's presence endures in ways both humble and profound. And in that endurance lies a gentle form of hope. Though nothing can change what was lost, the love that surrounded her continues to move outward, shaping hearts, guiding decisions, and softening the world in subtle ways. Reflection, then, becomes more than remembrance. It becomes a promise carried forward, ensuring that Rowan's brief life still leaves traces of kindness, vigilance, and compassion in the years that continue to unfold. This awareness does not arrive all at once, nor does it remain without effort. It must be renewed in everyday moments, when someone asks an extra question, notices a quiet change, or chooses concern over hesitation. In these small decisions, responsibility becomes shared rather than distant, and protection becomes something lived rather than merely hoped for. Change grows quietly this way, rooted in attention and sustained by care. And so Rowan's story settles into something deeper than sorrow alone. It becomes a reminder that even the briefest life can leave a lasting call to kindness, urging others to watch over what is fragile and precious in the world around them. If that call continues to be heard, softly, steadily, and with compassion, then her legacy endures not only in memory, but in the safer, more attentive future people strive to build together. In the years that follow, life continues in quiet, ordinary ways, seasons turning, children growing, new stories beginning where old ones once paused. Yet woven gently through it all is the memory of a girl whose presence, though brief, left an imprint deeper than time could erase. She is remembered in kindness shown to strangers, in watchful care offered without being asked, and in a soft determination to protect what is innocent and small. And perhaps that is where her story truly rests, not only in loss, but in the enduring tenderness it awakened in others. For as long as her name is spoken with love, and as long as compassion rises where sorrow once stood, Rowan's light does not fade. It remains quiet, steady, and guiding, carried forward in the hearts of those who choose, again and again, to remember.